All right, we're going to bring on a guest who's an expert in the public transit world. His name is Eric Miller, senior transit planner with FHU, an engineering and planning firm based in Denver, but with an office in Omaha. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Oh, well, we need to get his microphone. Okay. Can we hear you?
Yeah, I hope so.
Oh, there we go.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
okay. Good. Yeah, real close to the microphone. So Eric was with us on the show almost 19 years ago to the day. Yep. And we had you on, and you were in the process, you're an Omaha native, you're on in the process at the time of transitioning to Denver.
Right, yeah, I was going to grad school at the time, my planning degree.
And doing a planning degree, and then you ended up working out there.
Yep, I was an intern at URS at the time. It just doesn't exist anymore.
And now after all these years, you've come back to Omaha, but you're still in the transit world.
Yep, still doing transit planning.
And it's a nice time for you to be back because, we're going through these plans to get our streetcar launched and all that. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit about, given your experience, because Denver, they haven't really done the streetcar thing. They did more of the light rail thing, but it's been a big success.
Yep.
And it's spread out all over the metro area. And I notice every time when I'm driving around Denver, when I'm on one of the freeways, their light rail oftentimes follows some of the freeways like I-25, 225. I'm starting to see transit-oriented development pop up along there. So, well, first of all, why don't you just give us an idea about what transit is like in Denver, and then we can talk a little bit about transit-oriented development.
Yeah, that sounds good. And so I actually worked for the Regional Transportation District, RTD, their transit authority, for about 12 years. And so during that time, we opened 9 new lines or extensions, rail lines. And so it was an exciting time for growth. The Denver model was basically based on a regional model, trying to connect all the cities together because there's a lot of different cities and one transit authority covers them all. And so we tried to get everybody together on this plan. And I think every mayor was in favor of it except for one. So it was a pretty big, successful deal.
So when you talk about light rail, and I actually, in a different life, when I was in the Los Angeles area, we had the RTD as well. And when you talk about light rail as opposed to streetcar, I assume that light rail means it's a dedicated, is it dedicated not following the automobile traffic?
Right. Yep. Yeah. Dedicated right away. And I should mention there's a difference. There's light rail and commuter rail, which is basically the difference in Denver. The commuter rail just uses different vehicles. We basically have the same 15-minute, 30-minute frequencies throughout the day on all the corridors. But for the commuter rail, it meets FRA standards for running on freight track is basically the difference. So there's a little bit of both. So like, for example, the A line that goes from downtown to the airport in Denver, that's commuter rail. Even though
it is?
Yep. A lot of people say it's light rail, even in Denver. I mean, they just think, everything's light rail, but there's a difference. And even in Denver, we have some almost street running light rail that acts like a streetcar, like one car trains, stops every 3 blocks or so.
So Denver's had this great success story with their light rail. Of course, they're a market size, probably 3 times the size of the Omaha market size, if not more. But Eric, talk to us a little bit about some of the development that has happened in Denver because of all of this light rail.
Right. Yeah. And so that's probably been the biggest positive thing to come out of this. I remember when we've passed fast tracks in November 2004, which was a big vote to increase the sales tax. A lot of things we're talking about. We're going to reduce air quality is going to get better. We're going to reduce traffic congestion. That didn't happen as much as we wanted it to. There's still a big mode split. I think like the transit mode share went up a little bit, which is good. But the biggest thing was the impact to the land use and the impact to development, especially around stations. That's been huge. And so obviously in the Denver model, since we have light rail and commuter rail, stations are spaced a little farther apart until you get to places like downtown, like Denver Union Station, even the 5 Points area where I mentioned we have the streetcar like light rail, where we have development patterns more closely together like we'll see here in the streetcar. But in Denver, usually you'll see it centered around stations, usually in that like quarter-mile walkable area, really close to the station. But it's been very successful. There's still some spots where I'll go by on the train and like, this still hasn't been developed. But there's a lot of places where it's like, finally this is coming together and we're getting to see some, redevelopment. We're seeing some greenfield development out in the suburbs. And we're also seeing the brownfield places that like industrial sites that abandoned, went away. And then now finally we're getting some increased development, which is good because in Denver, housing prices are so expensive.
Does Denver charge for their light rail?
Yes, yeah, it's fare based, and there have been several changes over the years. One of the changes they're doing now is kids are going to be able to ride free starting, I think, this month. But we still have a fare system that's based on how far away you're traveling on it. And it's a little more expensive here than the metro.
What was the estimated total cost of the project?
Oh,
I know
gosh,
it covers
I can't
a
remember.
lot bigger area.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's a series of projects, I suppose, because they phased it.
Yeah. I want to say it was in the neighborhood of $7 billion. I can't remember.
What are they smoking over there? Oh, okay.
Well, that's Colorado.
Yeah.
Well, and for comparison, our first streetcar line is 306 million. And so, we're talking. But again, as Eric said, the light rail is more regional. It's connecting far-flung suburbs to downtown Denver, whereas our first stab at this with the streetcar is just to connect high-density areas within Omaha. Later in the next segment, we'll talk to Eric specifically about some things that we could expect to happen with Omaha's streetcar system. But before we do that, before we go to the break, Eric, when you look at Denver's light rail network, how has it benefited downtown Denver more, or the suburbs, or maybe some of those urban areas between the suburbs and downtown? How would you, and if there's not one specific area that has benefited more, how would you characterize those types of benefits in different parts of the metro, or whether urban or suburban?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's benefited both kind of equally. Again, it's based on this regional model, which one of the things is RTD has an elected board of directors similar to what Omaha Metro is moving towards. And so a big part of that was, hey, we want our piece of the pie, right? And so which is kind of good, because now we're seeing all sorts of different developments. So we're seeing some suburban developments that are a little different than downtown, maybe not as intense, a little more laid back and that sort of thing. So it's kind of cool to get that mix. So if you're like a new person coming into Denver looking for an apartment, you'll have some variety now. Whereas when I moved there like 19 years ago, it's kind of like, well, if I want an apartment next to a rail station, I basically have to live downtown. So it's kind of nice now. You've got all these urban centers across the region.
All right, we have Eric Miller with us. He's a senior transit planner with FHU here in Omaha, and had been with the FHU office in Denver for a long time and transferred back here to his hometown. And Eric, we were talking about how transit in Denver has really kind of changed the landscape. Here in Omaha, we're going to see construction start pretty soon, and it'll take a couple years, but we're going to connect a streetcar. A streetcar will connect downtown Omaha through Midtown to the University of Nebraska Medical Center. All right, in your opinion, what's this new streetcar line going to do for Omaha's urban core?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it'll be really beneficial in a number of ways. I think kind of the three biggest things that I always think about is, first of all, it kind of puts you on the map as being, having this new asset, right? That's kind of talked about. So that's number one. And number two, having that extra mobility choice for people is going to be huge. But then also like the ability to shape kind of the development patterns and not having to rely so much on parking in this part of the urban core, that's huge too. So I might have said them kind of in the reverse order of priorities, but I think those are the big advantages for this part of Omaha, and just grow from there, hopefully.
So our streetcar will be free. There's going to be no fare.
Right, like DC and Kansas City.
Okay, how important is that?
Well, I think it's good. You see a lot of transit agencies, not even with streetcars, with buses, trending that way, like Kansas City's system, for example. We've had some others, and I've been somewhat involved in other studies that look at, hey, should we transition to a zero fare? Because part of that is it gets to a point where, for example, there's not a single like transit system or rail system for passengers that makes a profit. And so you have to figure out how much is that subsidy. Well, if your fare box recovery, like how much fares cover the operating costs, is so insignificant and so small, is it really worth charging fares? Because you have to, collect the fares and maintain the machines and all that. And so you get to a point where maybe not. And so I think that's kind of good. And then just the accessibility and the equity for letting passengers ride is huge.
Not only that, people will rely on it for getting to work and things like that, but the flow and saving the time to figure out how to pay for it and all that kind of stuff.
Good point.
One part of it, thank you. One part of it is when someone doesn't pay for something, it's kind of you get what you pay for. But I think this is different. If you have a public event or something, and if you don't make people register, or you don't make them pay a nominal fee or something. They just kind of like, forget it. But this is kind of a necessity for some people. And then I think it's great that nobody's going to complain that it's free. They're going to complain about how it gets paid for and make sure our taxes don't go up, which they shouldn't. But
right.
so I give the stakeholders credit for let's make it no charge.
So, Eric, let's say this thing is a big success, and we hope it is. I think there's a good chance it will be. Where, in your opinion, as a professional transit planner, where would maybe a second or a third phase be? Where will we extend this thing beyond the downtown midtown line?
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about, and always something you want to keep in mind as you're building that first system, because then you want to think, hey, are we putting this in place where there's a logical extension and we're not, doing something that we have to tear out or really deconstruct in 5 or 10 years. But so there's some logical extensions. There's obviously a couple north, like 30th Street, maybe 16th, south, maybe 10th, 13th, going out west, Arcs Harbin. Do we take Saddle Creek? Do we go through UNMC? That sort of thing. East to Council Bluffs. I think what makes sense is you just kind of look at where the local where you have the local people that are really supporting it and moving forward. And so what I see is like Council Bluffs is way ahead of everybody else with the extensions, because they've already done a couple of studies. They're doing another study now that'll start soon, an environmental study that'll last a couple years, so that puts them in line for federal funding. So as challenging as it is to get across the river and go over that way, they've actually been putting in a lot of work, so that's good to see. So that could potentially be the first one. But I could also...
What about the airport?
Yeah, the airport, that's a good question. In my mind, like, obviously, like, coming from Denver, it's a lot different because our airport is huge. But even our airport in Denver, like, most of the ridership is people that work at the airport.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it is a massive employment center. And so you get on the A line, like, because I've had some early flights out at like 6, 7 a.m. You get on it at that time, like 3 or 4 in the morning, and it's people going to work, and the trains are just packed. So do we have that here in Omaha? I don't know.
Not really.
Yeah,
the need.
But on the other hand, it's very close to downtown, very logical, right? So maybe there's a way to make it work. But it's interesting that a lot of cities look at that.
Well, Eric, we appreciate you joining us and giving us a little insight. It's exciting. Trenton and I know we can't wait to see what types of buildings start popping up once the track construction starts. But appreciate you joining us. Welcome back home to Omaha.
Thanks.
Glad you've decided to come back.
Yeah.
Eric Miller, Senior Transit Planner from FHU, engineering planning firm.
If you like this video, be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons. And remember, Grow Omaha is not just media. This is a mission. We are trying to build up Omaha and make it an even better place. We can only do that with your help. Share this video with your friends, neighbors, and family.